Do you have to be really intelligent to be wise? Opinion varies, but I'll give you my opinion straight away and then justify it. Yes, you do need to have above average intelligence, but I would add two important qualifiers. Understanding these qualifiers, types of intelligence, and the importance of virtue is the purpose of this lecture. The first qualifier is that because there are multiple forms of intelligence, we have to know what sort of intelligence we are talking about. Howard Gardner, a Harvard University professor of cognition, in 1983 identified 9 types of intelligence that included being nature smart, musical sound smart, logical mathematical smart, existential or life smart, interpersonal or people smart, bodily smart, and linguistic smart. Now, I suspect that there are a lot more ways of being smart, like Indigenous people's capacity to read an arid landscape for survival, or to transfer knowledge and history across generations without written records. But putting to one side these smarts, let us focus on the cognitive domain, where 2 broad forms of intelligence can be understood from a developmental view. These are fluid and crystallised intelligence, concepts first used by Raymond Cattell and John Horn in 1966 and still widely used today. Fluid intelligence is determined by the level of complexity a person can apply to determine relationships when he or she cannot draw on knowledge already stored in memory. In short, it is the capacity for abstract reasoning that is independent of learning, experience, and education. Crystallised intelligence is the ability to use judgment, discrimination, and reasoning, drawing on one's experience and learning. They are complex acquired abilities that contribute to a capacity for high-level judgment. Highly intelligent people deploy both intelligences to produce a practical intelligence. Robert Sternberg, a world leader on practical wisdom, writes, "Practical intelligence is defined as the ability that individuals use to find a more optimal fit between themselves and the demands of the environment through adapting to the environment, shaping or modifying the environment, or selecting a new environment in the pursuit of personally valued goals. It can be characterised as street smarts or common sense, and can be contrasted with academic intelligence or book smarts. Crystallised intelligence is built on tacit knowledge, which in turn is the practical ability to learn from experience and to apply that knowledge in pursuit of personally valued goals. Such knowledge is, by its nature, context-specific. Sternberg provides an example. Imagine you are in a public forum and your boss says something or does something that you perceive as wrong or inappropriate. If the boss does not ask for questions or comments, then you should speak directly to the point of contention and not make evaluative statements about your boss. This will save the boss from embarrassment and preserve your relationship with him or her. As Sternberg points out, tacit knowledge is more than a set of abstract procedural rules. It is context-specific knowledge about what to do in a given situation or class of situations. Fluid intelligence appears to peak before we turn 40 years of age, whereas crystallised intelligence grows with age. Fluid intelligence is relatively easy to measure. For example, Mickler and Staudinger test for logical and analogical reasoning, a central dimension of fluid intelligence. However, testing for crystallised intelligence is much more difficult because it is so context-specific. However, Mickler and Staudinger found something very interesting and reassuring. That is, although the cognitive variables of fluid intelligence were significantly correlated with personal wisdom, those with higher levels of fluid intelligence presented an inverted U-shaped relationship between personal wisdom and fluid intelligence. More specifically, they found that the top 15% of fluid intelligence, the brainiest people, had a marginally negative relationship with personal wisdom, controlled for age, and showed a trend to lower scores in the value domain of universalism, which is considered to be part of a mature person's value system. Consequently, we propose that increases in fluid intelligence, what some might measure as IQ, is required for wise judgment, but that above a certain level, fluid intelligence may be inversely related to wise judgment. For those who remember the 1994 movie Forrest Gump, it can be said that the low intelligence hero certainly displayed good virtues. This was because he had been sensitively and wisely raised by his mother, who provided useful aphorisms for him to navigate life, like, "Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." And "You've got to put the past behind you before you can move on." However, Mr. Gump, as decent as he might be, would not be able to display capabilities such as deep self-insight, transcendent thinking, imagining scenarios, or complex problem solving. Let's now move to my second major qualification. This is the centrality of virtue as a fundamental characteristic of wisdom. The Berlin School identified a cognitive, an emotional, and a motivational facet to wisdom. However, Monica Ardelt, in a 2004 article, criticised the Berlin School for defining and measuring wisdom in an excessively cognitive way. Ardelt devised a measure for wisdom with three components: cognitive, reflective, and affective. The reflective component incorporates the transcendent capability to reflect on one's actions in order to understand their subjective feelings, and also to reflect on others' beliefs in order to develop understanding of the other. The affective component she unashamedly defines as a person's sympathetic and compassionate love for others. It depends on the reflective transcendent capacity to reflect in order to reduce self-centeredness. One of the reasons I find Ardelt's work useful is that it incorporates the element of human virtue. Reassuringly, there is some emerging empirical evidence that wise actions are virtue-based. For example, in a Taiwanese study by Xiying Yang in 2008, she analysed 66 Taiwanese people nominated by others as being wise. Yang found three processual features of wise people: the ability to integrate the dialectics of life, to embody wisdom in their own personal practices, and that, as a result of this wise practice, contributed towards well-being. Ultimately, as Aristotle pointed out, wise action is based on intellectual and moral virtues. The practice of these virtues resolves a fundamental existential question of the purpose of life itself. Life is best lived when we contribute to eudaimonia, which is the Greek word for human flourishing. Those involved in development work clearly are already driven by this eudaimonic motivation to increase human flourishing. While it is noble to desire human flourishing in situations of need, wise leaders in development contexts need to be cautious in trying to bring this about. For example, in regions where women's rights are very limited, sensible caution is needed to bring about change. Instances of successfully reducing domestic violence and providing greater economic independence for women show that it required more than fluid intelligence. Crystallised intelligence, developed by observing and reflecting on the current practices, is needed to deeply understand how not to get potential allies offside. Emotional regulation is also needed in order to avoid intervening to prevent harm when that intervention could simply lead to even greater repression. Knowing how to frame changes in a way that keeps power brokers on side and creates awareness among the oppressed is not something that a development leader can learn from a textbook. It is a skill and insight that is achieved by patient observation and by building relationships, which are the mark of a wise person. So, to sum up, we have seen that wisdom does require a strong platform of intelligence. This intelligence comprises our capacity for solving problems by drawing on a capacity to think abstractly. However, a vital aspect of our intelligence as we grow older is crystallised intelligence, which uses rich life experience and reflection to add to our store of deep understanding. These develop transcendent thought. However, a necessary, not just desirable, but necessary component of wisdom is to be virtuous. This is transcendent morality. It is transcendent because it places the good of others as the cornerstone of all we do.